Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking us in the history of that amazing institution. And I hope that we will, in the discussion session, we will probably have many, many questions. I already have some, but I cannot start right now. Uh, we have a problem with Dr. Kennedy Hassan, who is stuck in his hotel having some connection problems. So I really think that we can move on with the opening of a discussion session. And if he happened to solve his technical problem in between, we will give him the stage to give his presentation. So it is really unfortunate because we really have this wonderful sample of cases that showcase how different society in different part of a continent handle conflict, handle problems, manage governance. And I wish to thank all the presenters for very inspiring presentations. So we have two core questions to address in this session, and you all know that what the core questions are, and we can just remind you what they are so that when we start the discussion, we'll look at the Q&A to see what we have. So far, we have two questions there, one technical and the other one more open. But our two core questions to handle in this sample of case study from the diaspora and the continent, it is a very balanced session in that direction. What are the deepest and most significant element these examples and experience have in common? We have to look at commonalities of these different experiences from different parts of the continent and the diaspora world. And what are the most significant differences? So this is the comparative approach will probably pop up in our discussion. And the second core question is, what are the important challenges and accomplishment of all the case study we went through? It is unfortunate we do not have the Somaliland case studies, but we can start with the four case studies that have been presented. And I will start with looking at the Q&A and read the question we have. We do seem to have, the one was left because it was a technical questions about how to pronounce Gashasha and how to spell it or how to write it. But we have a more elaborate questions from Mr. Edwin Kiama for Professor David Sebudubu. So he says, thank you for your very informative presentation on Botswana. My question is, you say there were powerful chiefs before independence and the new independence government clipped their power. Did the powerful chief-based governance system exist before the arrival of colonialists? Or was it created by colonialists to help them govern? So Professor Sebudu, can you start answering that question? And then we will ask questions we will now, among ourselves, start asking questions to all the presenters. Is David there?
Thank you very much, Augustine, and thank you, Edwin, for that interesting question. You know, in terms of the power, the chiefs in Botswana continue to enjoy some power, to the extent that if a chief of a particular area were to resign and stand for elections, actually, as it has happened in a number of cases, they always win elections. But what has basically happened is that their powers were reduced. They were not completely taken out. They still remain powerful to some extent. But back to your question, the system, it exists. It was there during the pre-colonial era. So it was not created by the colonialists. So in short, it was there before. So these chiefs were there because we had different states existing in the different parts of the protectorate before the arrival of the colonialists. So the system there of our powerful chief system, it was there before the colonialists, in short.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I can build on that to ask you directly a simple question about these chiefs. Let's say in contemporary Botswana, how are the chiefs appointed? Are they elected, or are they succession through family lines? How are the chiefs selected in Botswana system today?
We have two types of chiefs. In fact, let me start by giving the context. Say that initially, the Constitution recognized 8 major tribes, okay, who were mainly Tswana speaking initially, but as the other chiefs and other community areas complained about that section, it was ultimately repealed and removed from the Constitution. But the chiefs in those areas and the areas that fall under those sub-districts, they are they inherit. But the chiefs in the other areas, they are voted. So there are two types of chiefs: those who are voted into from the minority groups, and those who are born chiefs. So there are two sets of chiefs that we can talk about in Botswana. So we have two houses which make parliament. We have the house whereby the members are elected by the people, and the House of Chiefs. Its main role is mainly advisory. The members from the so-called major tribes, their chiefs automatically, they automatically gain entry into the House of Chiefs. But still, the other chiefs are elected into the House of Chiefs. So you can see that there is an element of disparity there, inequity in terms of representation into the House of Chiefs. So when that section that I made reference to, which made other chiefs major, was repealed, there was a referendum which led to the expansion of the size of the House of Chiefs. It included other areas, but even then, the other areas, their chiefs continue to be elected into the House of Chiefs. So that's where the distinction is. The other ones, they automatically become chiefs.
Okay, thank you. I will ask, if somebody has a question, we can ask it. But I will ask the same question to all the presenters, to Alice, to Martina, and to Larissa. How is the system of appointment of officials in the respective system? Alice has presented quite well how officials of Gachacha Court are generally appointed. It will be interesting to know for the Quilombos, for instance, how are position of power filled locally? How do they manage to pick the officials? And the same questions to Martina about the Maroon system. And this is one of the comparative approach we can really enter through that way and to look how there are similarities and differences in all these different governance systems. So Larissa, you can take on from that.
Merci pour les questions. Bon, je continue en français là.
Oui, oui, bien sûr.
Aussi les Quilombos d'Ambroise.
So, as far as they're concerned, we know from the official documentation and existing literature that these have come about following some military expeditions. So there is no sort of sufficiently precise description of exactly what the interaction between people or the relation between the elected members, kings or chiefs, whoever, came about. Because some of these appellations may not match the actual reality. Say, king, as it is used in Portuguese or in Latin, may not be such a grand function as we could expect. And then we know also, for example, that a specific king called Zumbas, who came from the Vila Real called Macaco. And in other cases, who comes from Sucupira, they tended to co-opt by brotherhood. In fact, men who were brothers would be rulers. And we also know from another source that there were 9 of them. So basically, there tends to be a family dynasty in this case, or we can deduce at least that such a thing must have existed. Now, what else comes to my mind in terms of African governance example? If we try to be more specific, for example, the kings of Congo also existed at the same time, at the time of Quilombo. Because to this day, when I talk about Quilombos, we know there are, at least for those who were present in Brazil, their chiefs would be customary chiefs, chosen or elected because of their age, because of their being ancient or founding fathers among the pioneer members of a family, also for some spiritual virtues and qualities. And also it can be said that in Palmares or in Ambrosio, we could imagine or extrapolate basically that they currently witnessed habits go back a long time, basically. But otherwise, the 400 or 500 years ago, some brotherhoods and communities kept a certain amount of written documents, say the Brotherhood of the Rosary members, and that shows that the leaders were elected by, in 2 ways. On the one hand, by the sum of money that was handed in, basically, and that's quite interesting because at the time of slavery, there were clear regulations for seizing slaves and also regulating the amount of money that could be seized and how it should be distributed, basically. So this brotherhood basically exploited the slaves' dowries without it being a crime because it had been clearly legitimized. So to summarize and go back to the election mode, so there was this aspect of thing, and another aspect more related to their spiritual negotiation skills, their aptitude to interact with the supernatural powers.
OK, c'est bon?
Oui, c'est bon. Merci.
OK, c'est parfait. Nous avons, Alice, do you want to add something about the selection of officials very briefly? Because we have to give a microphone to one of the members of Dr. Sumuno who want to say something.
Well, very briefly, as I said, it was by election at the community level and without campaign. So members of the community could designate somebody of the community that they believe had integrity and could deal with the conflict. Practically, he will stand or she will stand, and those members of the community who support him or her would come. Perhaps the novelty of Gacaca is that the law establishing the Inhinko Gacaca provided for an encouragement for women to be designated, which was not the case. One of the novelty of the thing. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Let's give, does Martina have a comment? Is she online? No, she doesn't seem to be there.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Yes. Yeah, please briefly, let's know about the Maroon experience, how some of the key positions are filled, how are they designated?
Yes, we have a system, the Njuka, that's the tribe, and you must know the tribe is a collection of many laws. Now it is tradition for the Njukas that the chief, the upper chief, comes from one law, and that's the Oto law. So the Oto law, the built of many bays. You understand? Many bays.
Yes, I do.
So the chief comes from one bay. Let's say this time it is from bay A. The next time it is from bay B, and that's the
rotating system.
The son, yes, the son of the older sister in the bay.
Every time
it's related.
Okay. All right. So thank you. I need to allow Professor Dr. Semunu to switch his microphone on and ask his question.
Greetings, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I just have a quick question for Martina Amoxi. Just on the, Haiti, for instance, also had Maroon communities, and it's very widespread in the Americas. But it seems that Haiti had a successful revolution, established a state, a nation state. Is there a sort of progression from Maronage to the establishment of full independence? How can you explain the relationship? It's a general question I would like clarity on. Thank you.
You see, when the enslaved African fled to the bush, they started to fight resistance. They fight the white man.
Okay.
They rebelled. they went to the plantation. They took what they needed, and so they frustrated the whites. So the whites sent troops to fight them. It doesn't got any success. So they started with treaties, peace treaties, and after that, one of the conclusion of the treaties was that they were free. The Maroons were free. After that, they built their society. But you had resistance, and so yeah, the rebellion of some troops. I am from the Njuka tribe, and the Njuka tribe, they rebelled. The people of the Njuka tribe rebelled from 6 plantations So they were fighting the colonial government couldn't do anything. It was the tempatic obstand, we call it.
At some point they took over six.
Yes, at some point they took over 6 plantations. Because history teaches us that when we learn history, it looked like our people didn't rebel. They undergo everything as the white man wanted. But in Suriname, I tell you, they rebelled. Maybe you don't read it in history books, but the tribe I come from, they were very rebellious.
Rebellious, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And,
All right.
and
Thank you
because
so much.
of them, the peace treaty started. The first peace treaty was concluded in 1760. Because
Okay. All right. So we take a question from the Q&A. Second question by Mrs. Rose Kabi from Cameroon. It is in French. I read it for Dr. Alice Karakezi. I suppose your French is excellent, so I can just read it for you. Ma question s'adresse à Dr. Alice Karakezi. Ne pensez pas vous que le gachacha a réussi parce que la taille de la population est petite et le facteur linguistique qui unit. Comment on peut appliquer une sortie de crise en Éthiopie qui est plus grande? You need a translation. We have the translation, but I can translate it for you very quickly.
Oh, merci beaucoup, Madame Rose Kebou.
Ok, c'est parfait.
Je vois que je peux lire votre réponse.
You are right. I think that I alluded to it. Clearly, I always say that Rwanda is a dot on the map. It is a very small country. And this is very significant. The Gachacha came from the Rwandan language. And it is a language which is spoken across our country. So we have one single linguistic and cultural identity. So the mechanism was known. It is not prescribed and it's not very rigid, but this method was very well known for everyone. So to revive this method, we needed one common language, the Kiri Rwanda. And we used the Rwandan language. So witnesses didn't have problems to give their testimony. I won't talk about transferability, but I think that in all communities, in all societies, we have traces which relatively survived to the cultural turning point, including colonization, and we can put them into perspective and revive such traditions. I don't think that the gachacha can be transposed in another society, but I am quite confident. And I think that when we mobilize what people experienced, are aware of, and have done, we can reinvigorate these kind of governance systems. We can do it everywhere, but we need to look into the specific context. And one last thing, maybe, sometimes I read that yes, the Cha-Cha was very often we think that everything that is African is informal because it is not written. And this is a trap. Even we fall into such trap because we accept that what we used to have was informal because it wasn't codified in written. And sometimes I put this into question. I disagree completely. I think that authority, whether it be moral, communal, or from the state, in states like Burundi and Rwanda, there were states before colonization. And this is very important in order to build a consensus between the persons who rule and the persons who are ruled in order to create a platform or a cultural identity and in order to build consensus ultimately. So in a nutshell, I do not think that there is a panacea. I don't think that there is a universal system, but I think that African peoples are clever and they can see the similarities, the things that have helped them to move forward, and they can adjust in order to resolve their conflict. We should know no borders. We should understand that we have no boundaries. Think about all the experiences behind us. It's much more significant than what we are experiencing today. So people in the past have experienced problems, and we need to look into that and adjust in order to solve our issues. I hope that I could answer the question. And that it...
Oui, je vais passer la parole à Ali Moussa qui a posé une question au professeur David.
Asked a question. Please, Ali, over to you.
The informal system compared to the written and formal system. Yes, this is, Alice, a very important, deconstruction that we have to make in our own research, because we continue to assimilate non-written things to informality and tradition and all that. When I studied the hair, what I discovered is that historically, those who, the founder of the hair used to be people who know how to write and to read. Mainly it was in Arabic, because Zeila, one of the cities which is central, was a great university where we have a lot of scholars. So those people, the way they managed, we had the impression that, from historical record, that they used to know the Arab legal system. They didn't write the hair in written. And I suspect, and this is my hypothesis, because they want to keep it oral, because that use the poetry, they wanted to conserve it in the language and in the poetry so that it became a really transmissible democratic system. And because of what happened in these cities with authoritarian rules, they didn't want to replicate the same error. So it was a choice to keep it in the orality instead of writing, to make the system flexible, transformable, and all that, and to facilitate the interiorization of the law through the poetry and all the legend and saying and all this literature. So that's one point. And I just want to react to that. The second, yes, the question I want to ask to David is, David, you have said that this traditional system of chiefdom or kingdom was not purely democratic. I'm using your own word. So, and because what do you mean by they were not purely democratic before the colonialization and the post-colonial situation? That means do that mean that the process of their designation was not democratic, or the way that the chief has been selected was not democratic? And do you think that it is because they have this weakness of not being perhaps completely democratic, has become a weakness in the new context of post-colonial, and perhaps is the reason where they accepted to lose power and to accept a kind of symbolic representation at the different houses. This is my question. I don't know if I was clear, but I think I see a contradiction, and I would like to have your view on that.
Sorry, Ali, would you like to come again on that question?
My question was that you said that the traditional system was not that purely democratic, and now they are in a new context of a democratic country in Botswana, and perhaps that may explain why they accepted to lose some power in the new setting, in the new context.
Okay. Could I respond?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you for your question. The reason why I'm saying that the system is not democratic is in the sense that if you see the way the system works, it is such that decisions are made by the chief and his immediate advisors. Okay? The rest of the community, they don't really participate because they just come to endorse a decision that has already been made by the chief and his advisors. So by the time the decision is taken to the Khota meeting, that is the traditional parliament, a decision has already been made. So at the Khota, they are just simply endorsing the position of the chief and his advisors. That is how the system basically works. So it gives them, so even when the participation is allowed at the Khota, it's not everyone who is allowed to speak. You'll find that the people who are allowed to speak is those who have already decided on the position that is going to be taken, who happen to be the advisors. So that's how the system, even today, to some extent, it works along those lines. So that the chief and his immediate advisors would have met and taken a position. So by the time they take it to the Khota, the very people who were part of the initial decision or position are the ones who are allowed to speak, because you're expected to raise a hand. And the person who's presiding over will point first to the advisors. And once the advisors have spoken, everybody else is expected to follow. Because in terms of our Tswana culture and tradition and customs, you are not supposed to challenge the authority, because if you challenge those in authority, you are considered to be someone who is, I'm running out of time, just a second. You are considered to be someone who is not properly raised and cultured. So in terms of the culture, the expectation is that you must always endorse a decision of the elders. So that's how the system works. Such that even today, if the Khota is being presided over by a chief, and then there's a minister, you are not expected to offer an opposing position to what the minister is proposing. The moment you do that, you will be rejected by the community. You see, that's how the system basically functions.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I wish to make just a comment here about what I call a fallacy or the trap, because we're making a kind of, that was the old definition of difference between prehistory and history. With writing is the boundary between prehistory and history. I just want to say that a human history is longer without writing than with writing. And there was extremely elaborate societies before the emergence of writing. And when writing started in Sumer, in Mesopotamia and Egypt, it was for religious purposes or for accounting purposes. It became an instrument of administration much later. So writing is not part of a governance of society per se. It is a collateral. Writing was co-opted in the management of human political system. We have all the political system going as far back as we can go back in time. So we don't have to be trapped in this kind of fallacy. Now we are in a literate society and we use this because it is part of us, but it is not part of human nature per se. That's the comment I wanted to say. So if anyone have a new question, there are two participants who raised their hands. How does it work, those who raise their hands? I need some technical assistance here. We can give them the podium to ask the questions because they are not in Q&A, so I can access it. Need some technical support to have those who have raised their hands frame their questions or send it or something like that. Help is on the way. Mr. Ibrahim, you want to ask a question? Yes, please, go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup. J'ai du mal à...
Thank you very much. I find it hard to send my questions on the Q&A. Maybe it's because I'm not tech savvy, and this is why I prefer to raise my hand. I have two questions, but before I would like to react on what you just said, because it's very inspiring. Because when we talk about this deconstruction, we see that there is much to be done. And I'm very happy to hear what you have to say, because for us, when it comes to Vocadra, the system of the Kingdom of Mali, which was codified, we see that there are several forms of writings and many forms of formality. For example, we used to say that our body was our library, and the more we have responsibilities in terms of governance and responsibility, the more we avoid to write, because we think that we shouldn't write. There are many documents that we shouldn't have. For example, we say that the laid down writings is personified according to the body. So the person who comes with a message should not submit a written document. It's one part of a body. For example, the ear and then shoulder and the thigh, or the belly and then the eye. This is how we codify a message, because this is a very formal message. It's a very important message, and this is why we keep it very sacred. It's related to the human body. So in this system, the more it is formal, the less we use paper. And this is why I wanted to say this, because I think that it's very, very interesting while talking about what is formal, what is informal, or what is democratic and what's not. For example, in the family council, each time men gather, men automatically need to think and give a ruling about women. And each time women gather, in the end, they also need to think and give a ruling about men, because all men need women and vice versa. So they always work in tandem. And the same goes for young people and the elderly. For example, in the council, when there is common ground, what happens is that youngsters do not need to take the floor, because the elderly consulted them throughout the process. And if the issue relates more to youth, then they already consulted the elderly. So this is why when there is a consultation, half the work is already done in the end. And now 2 questions regarding to Martina Ahamsi. I have seen on the picture of the village level that there was something quite inspiring. There were 2 men and 2 women sitting down. And I wanted to understand the symbol. Do we see these 4 people as the entire village? Or how does it work? Because I don't understand this picture. So could you please tell me how it works with the Maroon Society in Suriname? These 4 people, did they represent the entire village, or were they representatives of family to support others and to speak on behalf of others? My second question relates to the gachacha. Today, I know that there is a living memory of the gachacha, which persists, even though at the institutional level, the consequences of the genocide were tackled. But what happens today with the gachacha after the genocide? Thank you very much. Please, Martina, are you online?
Pour Martina?
Oui, brièvement, oui.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Well, the picture she showed about the representative at village level, on the on the picture, what I noticed was there were 2 men and 2 women kind of on the forefront, and many other people in the background. So I'm trying to, from the picture, see if there is some kind of symbolic representation. Those 4 people on the first row, are they the representative of the entire village community, or are they representative of some kind of subsections, and the people in the background are also there to more or less speak on behalf of the other families or portion of the community, if you want? I don't know if it's clear enough.
Yes, no, not clear.
Okay, thanks.
Most of the time, the people who sit in front are the bashas, because you have woman basha and you have man basha, man basha. This it can be that there are bashas because on the village level, the kutu is the meeting is the kabite is in charge. You see, and when the basha gave the word to the, they said you can speak to the kabite directly. You speak to the basha, and the basha, for example, one of the elders come with some issue.
Okay.
He speaks to the basha speak to the kabite or kabite, then the kabite speak to the basha also, and the basha give it to the people.
Okay.
But they all sitting there in one meeting.
Yeah, it's part of the, I guess, a formal kind of way to share the words.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand that part. Quickly, sorry. I did hear in the last citations a reference to Jaja.
Jaja woman.
Yeah,
and
Jaja men and Jaja women in talking of the fighting spirit.
Strong.
Yes.
They're strong, they are the heroes.
But is this a reference to King Jaja in Dahomey?
I don't know, maybe.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
It's the language. It's the language.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.